What's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast. Look at us. We're back in the Modcast flow like we never left. I'm Jeff Ketchum. Jason Sukumel is in Vegas. He just wants somebody to shoot him at this point. Anwar Richardson also maybe at the cusp of wanting somebody to shoot him. Full household full of flu so far this week. As you come into the Specs chat, glad to have you. Do us a solid, whether you're in the chat participating or not. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, get notifications, all those things. Gentlemen, a little bit of breaking news today in the sense that Billy Glascock, the director of player personnel, leaves the University of Texas to take a job as the general manager at Ole Miss. It is a true sign of the times in 2024 that these positions are, I think, considered really important. Like, hey, who was this guy? What did he do? How valuable was he behind the scenes? Did he just get elevated at Ole Miss? I think these are all questions that people are asking. Jason, I'll start with you. I don't know that Glascock was a guy that crossed our paths too many times as the director of personnel. What are your thoughts on losing him? Him going to Ole Miss, is this a big deal in your mind at all? It's a pretty big position inside the program, but I'm sure Anwar and I will talk about this in a second, but it does always feel like ultimately Sark is in charge of every position, and that whatever they lose, they'll be okay because Sark's around.
Pretty much sums up how I feel, with all due respect to Billy Glascock. I mean, in Sark, I trust, right? I mean, and this is a highly desirable position. And I wish I knew the details. I mean, I'm assuming he's getting a pay grade. He's got maybe a sexier title, but it's kind of, Texas doesn't lose people to schools like Ole Miss very often, right? So they'll go out and find a home run hire. And listen, Billy Glascock is a big part of it. He's done a great job of assembling a talented roster. My only really interaction with Billy was one time I was out at Junior Day, and he came, and I was kind of hanging out outside of Moncrief, right? And we're interviewing guys as they come in and out, taking pictures. And he came out and kind of read me and a couple others the riot act. And Billy Glascock let it be known he is the guy that was building this championship roster. It's like, you guys think all these other people? No, it's me. I mean, Billy let us all know it was him building this championship roster. So I was like, okay, all right, good. There's my Billy Glascock interaction. So, clearly a valuable part of the program, but Sark,
I thought that was totally something different. Like you guys weren't supposed to be in a certain place.
Oh, there was a little bit of that too. And don't take pictures of this guy because he doesn't want it to be known that he's here and this, that, and the other. And we're like, too late, dude. It's already on Twitter. Wow. But yeah, he is the man in charge of building the roster. So obviously a key position on Mar, but Sark, listen, it's a desirable position. Texas has deep pockets. They'll go out and hire somebody good. So I'm not worried.
Jason just throwing Billy under the bus on the way out.
I'm in Vegas, dude. Hey, come on, let's have a little fun.
He's in Vegas with a drink in his hand. Like, oh, it's water.
Just water. I do have beer in the fridge, though. I'll probably dip into those here pretty soon. So, yeah.
Wow. Anwar, follow that.
And truth be told, Elmore, I dialed it down. If I really wanted to do the imitation, it was a little more vocal than that.
We should have done this at 4:30 after Jason had another drink. Because I feel like that's a few drinks of Jason in, and I can't imagine what he was on Slack later tonight at 8:00 when he's really been drinking. Catch, honestly, it's twofold, and I don't know if this was going to bleed into the bigger picture conversation that you want to have. The first thing is Glascock obviously was pretty well respected coming into this job. Like he had that reputation from NC State, and it was viewed as a loss when he came here. So, so he has a behind the scenes reputation that seems pretty well earned. And we may not know all of what he did. Of course, Jason's got a little bit of it, but we may not know all what he's done. But obviously Lane Kiffin, to what we know, Catch, is pretty damn serious about competing for not only an SEC title but a national championship. We've seen what they've been able to do through the portal. Like he's serious and about his business, about his craft. So I know when you said, Jason, like you usually don't lose guys like that to an Ole Miss. I feel like there's a different Ole Miss that the one that's Lane is creating. So I feel like that's a really aggressive move by Lane in order to go out there and do that. And the second part of it, Catch, it kind of bleeds into a little bit of the conversation that you and I we're having today on Orange Bloods with some folks. And there seems to be like a little pushback because if we at all suggest that, you know what, a GM could be something that could help out Sark. It's like, what do you think a GM does? Explain the role. Like I'm 5, like people get mad, like we're coming down on Sark because he doesn't have a GM, and we're not saying.
It's a little bit like when I say recruiting can be a little bit better, and it's like, what do you want to do? It was a top 5 class, and it's like, well, it can be better, right?
Yes, and so what's interesting, Catch, is for me is seeing certain programs and certain coaches say, you know what, this can make us better, and we're hiring this position. And then another program that's saying, like in Texas, is saying, nah, I don't necessarily know if we need that. So it's interesting because, like, when you see other people doing something, you're like, I wonder why Texas doesn't do that. But if we infer that, then people think we're slamming on Sark. It's just a question. It's all this. And those are probably the two things: aggressive move and really kind of like a Texas question as to how long will this be before Sark decides, you know what, this might be something worth investing in.
Well, and I also think, look, there's no getting around the fact that being the GM of Ole Miss is a promotion from being the director of player personnel. That's not to suggest that the director of player personnel isn't critically important, that doesn't have a title with people working underneath them. But a general manager in these programs is essentially like, he's the boss of everybody outside of what's on the field. That, you know, that it really does alleviate a lot of the load carrying that that Sarkisian has to do. I mean, Sarkisian, and I think the Kirby Smarts of the world and some of these people, they've got people like that in place. I don't know how willing they are to have a guy who has that kind of juice, that they want to be the head man with the juice. And I think that giving some of that control away is counterintuitive to how they got this job in the first place. It's very much everything. It's that old Jerry Jones line about I'm going to be so involved, socks and the jocks and all of that. Like, you know, there will be people who say, look, Sark's got this team here and in the playoff, and, you know, he's doing a really good job. And there's no question about that. Is it optimal? Could they be even better with a little extra support for Sark? I often find myself kind of amazed at everything that he's involved in, that and maybe it's less than I think, that maybe a guy like Billy Glascock was much more instrumental than maybe I know. I will say this. I reached out to like 5 people. I'll have some stuff in the war room about this. I reached out like, hey, thoughts on Billy Glascock? And I had some people say, it's a big loss, that, you know, he was heavily instrumental in everything that was going on. And I'm a little surprised by it. I was told that a week ago they may have gotten a raise, and that I think after the Bo Davis thing happened, there was a sense that, this is just something that I was told, that there was a sense that they wanted to make sure everybody else was kind of locked in. I feel like they must have done that on some level. The thing that I keep hearing is that this comes with Sark's approval, that he's not taking a job with his good buddy Lane Kiffin unless, like, Sark and Kiffin are boys.
Yeah.
So whatever's happening here, this isn't Lane Kiffin,
poaching,
who, by the way, is always messing with Sark on Twitter, and like, they're boys. So this comes with some approval. It clearly is a promotion for Glascock because I don't think Sark wanted to stand in the way. The name that I keep hearing from every single person is Brandon Harris. Either, well, Brandon Harris will do some of that and fill in the gaps until whatever is needed, or Brandon Harris is our rock star, or, Brandon Harris was already doing some of this. Glascock's departure, very organically, I don't get the sense that a memo was passed along today where people were saying, hey, make sure everybody knows that Brandon Harris is the real guy. These people are all scattered out. They all do different things. They all have different connections. And yet they all mention Brandon Harris today as Sark still has his main guy. I don't know what the hierarchy is, but everybody feels really good about Brandon Harris.
Brandon Harris he's actually in there recruiting and developing relationships with guys. They put him on the road recently to go visit guys in school. Brandon Harris has a role in getting guys to commit to Texas. Billy Glascock may be approving the roster and like, hey, we need another running back, or yeah, let's go ahead and offer this guy. Honestly, I think Brandon's probably has a more valuable role. If you ask me, obviously I'm a recruiting guy, but Brandon is an extension of every coach on that staff as a recruiter. I think he's going to be, Billy Glascock's going to be a general manager, right? It's a fancy title. Is that really any different than what he was doing in Austin, other than it's a bigger title? I mean,
at Ole Miss, he would be in charge of Brandon Harris.
Well, I think he kind of was at Texas too. I mean, he's director of player personnel. What's a general manager do? I think of Brian Cashman, my Yankees, who sucks. Who should get fired, by the way. But what's he do? He builds the roster, right? That's his job, to go out and acquire talent and build a roster. That's what Billy Glascock's job at Texas was. And then it was the assistant coach's jobs in Sark and Brandon Harris to go out and get the guys to commit. But to me, it feels like a general manager is a bigger title. It's a fancier title.
I think all of these guys at Texas work for Sark.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I would say Sark, then Billy Glascock, and then maybe the coaches even below them. But you're right. I mean, Sark's so hands-on, they probably directly answer to Sark more than anybody. But, to me, I don't view it as I don't know. I think as long as you got good assistant coaches, good head coaches, and a good director of recruiting, Brandon Harris, the guy you're talking about, Catch, I think this is a loss that Texas will be able to absorb.
Who do they go hire? Do they promote?
Time to ask for a raise. That's all I can say.
Yeah, Brandon, that's right.
Well, and he has leverage now. Like, yeah you probably should, because now that Glascock has left, the one guy that you wouldn't want to lose more than anything. And I think if push came to shove, and it was you could only keep one guy, whether it was Glascock or Harris, I think Texas would want to keep Brandon Harris. Again, that's not to besmirch Glascock at all. It's just that Brandon Harris does, in his role, and maybe as director of recruiting, he's a little more hands-on in like you said, relationship building.
With players, with parents, with coaches, with all of it. Yeah. It's
a lot of stuff. And, and I think that includes the portal. Like it's real. It's those guys all have their tentacles and other things. I guess onward, the question I was wondering is, do you promote Harris? And if Jason's right and the better job, because it's more powerful, it's maybe the thing that leads you. If Brandon Harris is like, hey, I want to be the GM of Texas one day. How do I get that job? Is it this? Do you bring in somebody with real clout and now he's the Texas of player personnel and you keep Brandon Harris where he is? Or is this a promotion for Brandon potentially? And then you bring in a new guy to be the director of recruiting.
So I think honestly, Catch, in a situation like this, I think you promote Brandon Harris to your GM at Texas, but you know what it becomes, Catch? When a guy gets the job, like Kyle Flood, he's technically the offensive coordinator, but we know who actually calls the plays, right? And we know other guys get the co-defensive coordinator label, but we know who actually kind of runs the defense. But you give the guy the title and the pay bump, so you don't have to worry about them going somewhere else or losing them. Like, the one thing you don't want to do if you're Texas, and the one thing you don't want to do if you're Sark, is you don't want to lose Brandon Harris to a potential GM position somewhere else, right? You don't wait for that. So honestly, what you do, I think, is you say, okay, you're valuable. We see value in you. So you know what? You will be our GM here in title. Even if it's just in title. So this way, if whoever comes, whether it's Oregon or whoever comes knocking in a year or so from now, you don't have, hell, a year or so, a week or so, or 2 weeks or so, you don't have to worry about losing that guy. So be honest with you, if I was Sark, and I'm not, and if Sark cared about my opinion, which he doesn't, so with those two caveats in place, I would promote Brandon, make him my GM, give him the pay bump, and then that way I ensure that he's going to be here for the long haul.
I'm going to say something that may be slightly controversial, somewhat against the grain, and I may be wrong, but you guys know, like, I've been an advocate for Texas hiring a general manager right about the time that the portal started to really become a thing. And we've seen schools like Miami. Now we've seen Ole Miss. This is a position that's kind of in vogue. I've always been an advocate for go get somebody specifically from the NFL who has upper management. Doesn't necessarily have to have been a GM in the NFL, although that might not necessarily be terrible. But so much of what I think a GM job is about now is relationships with agents, relationships with the real power hitters in football. And, if the portal continues, I don't know who Isaiah Bond's representative is, but he's got one. And that guy's probably the guy that you need to go through a lot of times. And I wonder if, somebody with that level of agent experience, all of the things that go into this is kind of a now minor professional football with NIL and the way these guys are earning dollars. And
I thought you were going to say Gary Patterson. Go hire Gary Patterson as your general manager.
Because I would hire somebody who has who's a deal maker, who has proven to be a guy that can have success in control of a staff, right? So, because if you were Sarkisian and you were hiring a general manager to somewhat take a load off of everything that you have to do, even if you're still the main guy in charge, you want to have somebody who's proven in terms of leadership, of directing people and multiple groups. It's one thing for Glascock to be in charge of player personnel, and I think he had like 4 assistants in the player personnel department, 2 on offense and 2 on defense. But you're also in charge of the recruiting coordinator, and you're also in charge of the guy who's in charge of events. And, I was looking at UT's on the football side of things, everybody they have in their department, and they got a lot of little mini departments. And it's like, God, is Sark got to micromanage all these people and check in with this person and this person and this person, which is really hard to do when you're on the road at Michael Fasusi's high school today, right? I mean, at some point, I just feel like the head coach, especially a head coach that loves to recruit as much as Sarkisian does, could they streamline things for him, for his benefit, to put him into a position where he's mainly just focused on the things that he does absolutely best, and some of this other grunt work is taken care of by somebody who's got professional experience in doing this exact thing at the NFL level at a time when I think college football is getting more like the NFL and less not like it, I guess.
Jason, want to take that?
No, makes sense, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's different developing a roster in the NFL and baseball and basketball where you got salary caps and this, that, and the other than it is at the college level. So you're saying maybe someone who already has relationships with agents and things like that? I don't think that's.
They just lost Jabbar Muhammad because of managing NIL dollars. And
well, that's not necessarily because of an agent. That's because Oregon ponied up a pretty NIL package. I mean, it's not. I don't think having a general manager is going to change that. That just comes down.
But I think Texas has about 13 to 15 million that they're working with right now annually that has to be spread out amongst people. And I think
so it is a salary, almost kind of a salary cap, and kind of
it is kind of. And again, if you had the thing that I thought about with Oregon when they went out and got Jabbar Muhammad is like they're not spending as much right now. If you look at the volume of super blue chip players that Texas has, they have twice as many as Oregon. So that means they've got like 20 something. I forget the number off the top of my head, but they've got like 20 something Anthony Hills, and Oregon has like 10 of those guys. So it's much easier for an Oregon. But I just think moving forward, and Anwar and I are much more pro portal than Jason has been or ever will be. But like I'm at the point now where Anwar, I may even be taking it a step further than me. He is really like, go get the portal guys. Well,
I'm not even reading his recruiting updates. I don't care I don't care about your instant analysis.
I'm not coming on your show anymore, Anwar. That's it.
I'm like, Catch, well, either one, because Catch does an instant analysis about some guy's upside. I'm like, well, guess what? If he sucks, he'll be replaced in 2 years. I don't even care. Like that's why I am at the portal. I'm like, it's a microwave society for me.
Well, and look, the thing that we've been talking about for years is that I've been suggesting in my mind that every 12 months that goes by, the portal gets a little more mainstream. The types of players that go in are different than they were in like 2021 when Texas was shopping at the Dollar Tree and getting portal linebackers who hadn't played in 5 or 6 years. And now it's like, hey, what all conference guys are jumping into the portal? And can we go get that guy? And hey, let's get this year's Adonai Mitchell, which will next year be, let's go get this year's Isaiah Bond. I think as the sport continues to evolve and the portal continues to evolve inside of it, it really is going to be more and more about knowing in advance who's going into the portal and who's not, who are their representatives, having relationships with those representatives. If Drew Rosenhaus is an agent for Isaiah Bond, having somebody who has experience with those level of representatives, I think would be really important as opposed to somebody who's learning that on the job.
The thing, what I would agree with you to a certain degree on this one, Catch, why the NFL thing might be a safer bet. We kind of see right now that the NCAA is cracking down on the NIL relationships with certain schools. We saw that like with University of Florida, recently. We see it like if they feel like you've talked to a kid about NIL before he actually stepped foot on campus, now all of a sudden, it's because I feel like the NCAA feels like they have to do something as relates to NIL. So they're kind of, going after some little ticky-tack fouls kind of thing is concerned. So you might want to have somebody who's polished, who can dance that dance. That's a really delicate dance that's there. So that's the only thing I would did, maybe kind of lean in your direction. It's you've got to, there is this NCAA component in here. And you have enough people complaining where you're starting to see the FSUs and Tennessees and Florida's starting to get a little ticky-tack. And so if you're Texas, you got to be careful that you don't have a guy that everyone can look at and examine and say, oh, did this person suggest one little thing that somehow, some way can come back and bite you in the butt?
The other thing is, Jason, is that, look, what we kind of have an idea of what Brandon Harris is really good at because we've seen, we hear people talk about him. We know how active he is. I feel like every time I have a conversation with somebody, they mention a new way in which Brandon Harris is involved. Do we want that guy having to stop doing what he's doing at 2:00 on a Thursday because he has to have a meeting with the director of equipment operations? You know what I mean? Like the thing that a GM does is that a GM is going to be the supervisor for the head coach who oversees the director of high school relations, which is Jamal Finner. He's going to be in charge of the director of player personnel. That's Billy Glascock. The director of player development. That's Kevin Washington. The director of recruiting is Brandon Harris. The director of recruiting operations is Taylor Searles. The coordinator for recruiting operations is Kendall Perry. It goes on and on where there are all of these. I mentioned there's a director of equipment operations, and there's a director of football creative media. I don't know that I want Brandon Harris being in charge of all of those because I don't know that allows for him to be the best version of himself for all of the things that he does that would make us even talk about him in that light anyway. I'd like to get somebody who's pure management, pure. They know agents. They know how to deal with people. They make the head coach's job easier. And that person is able to coordinate all of those things so that, if the creative media people have a big meeting that they need to be in, Sark doesn't necessarily have to be in that meeting. That a general manager handles that because they're supervising all of these little different channels. And ultimately, we know that Sark's in control. I do wonder oftentimes, do we not see a general manager in place? Because I wonder if, you guys tell me, if you have a general manager, if Ole Miss wins a national championship this year, how much credit does Billy Glascock get? We know that in pro sports, the GM gets ton of credit, right? It's like a co-sharing of the credit with the coach. I wonder sometimes with some of these schools, the Georgias, Saban, I don't think he had a GM, are some of these true powerful coaches is about sharing credit, is about control. Like, what is the hesitation in if you've got the money to make your job a little bit easier and a little bit more streamlined, why wouldn't you do it? Well, Sarkisian hasn't shown an urge at this point to do it. What would be the biggest reason? Just, is it onward? Is it just he's in control and he doesn't want to give that up?
There's a couple of things as relates to Sark. One, I think he genuinely likes working a lot. Like I really, I don't, and look, when you got young kids running around the house, like it's totally different, right? But if you got kids and they're out of the house, and I mean, I don't think he's bothered at all about getting up early in the morning, working throughout the day, working at night, being on the road. I feel like he literally technically enjoys that. And I think there's a thing with Sark that's a small thing as well, which is I think Sark's inner circle is really small as to the people that he really, really is going to trust. Like his people who are his people that he's going to say, like, who can speak into his life, right? And who can tell him, I think you should do A, B, and C. That number is probably 2, right? And that's probably really about it, right? And so I think the other portion of it is like whoever you get, it might be a figurehead, but I think Sark is like, I like being in control. I like controlling my destiny. I'm not putting my hands in the hands of somebody else. I got a couple of people who I trust. And outside of that, everybody else, you just do what you do. I'll take care of the rest.
You're potentially forcing him to expand his circle of trust more than he actually wants to expand his circle of trust.
Yes. And when it comes to the circle of trust, Falker, they ain't but a couple of people in that circle.
I think as an example, not every coach on his staff is in the inner circle of trust. Some guys might be. Kyle Flood, Jeff Banks is definitely in the inner circle, but everybody's got a different residency on Sark Island. I think you're right, Onward, ultimately. So I wonder what it would take for us to get to a point where there's a general manager at Texas. I think more likely, as he keeps it the way that it is, will a guy like Brandon Harris is director of recruiting lower on the totem pole truly than director of player personnel? If so, maybe that's where we see the Harris bump up come, and now they're just hiring someone, and it could come from within, right? I mean, it may be that they're like, either A, you know what, we've got a guy, maybe John Michael Jones, who's the assistant director of player personnel for offense. Maybe he gets the bump. I mean, they do have people. Michael Huff is the assistant director of player development. At some point, you know, does Kevin Washington ever take a job somewhere else? And now you're looking for a director of player development. Does Kevin Washington take Michael Huff and the other player development guys with him because those are his guys? Or are these guys here more for UT and more for Sark? And there's a chance, I think it'll be real interesting to see who gets moved up. Where do they feel like, if they've got the structure in place to hire from within, we'd be curious to see where that comes from. For instance, could a Kevin Washington become, instead of director of player development, he's now the director of player personnel, and Michael Huff gets Kevin Washington's old job, having been the assistant director of player development. Given what Sark just did with his defensive line coach, I'm kind of open-minded that young, aggressive, someone who's in it for the team, and, you know, I think that we're most likely to see him dabble in that.
I don't know if Huff wants a bigger role, and he's not leaving. That's a UT guy through and through. I don't like the idea of promoting Brandon Harris, not because Brandon couldn't do it, but you said it earlier, Ketch. This is a managerial role. Brandon Harris has a very specific and unique skill set, the same way Brian Carrington did. They're very personable. They're good recruiters. You know, if you make him in more of a manager type role, that kind of takes away maybe his biggest strength. So, you know, give Brandon Harris an extra title, give him more money if you need to keep him around. Hey, director of recruiting / whatever. But, you know, if you're going to replace Billy Glascock, to me, as you said, that's a managerial role who kind of oversees a lot of things, sits in meetings, and, you know, you listed all the different job titles there in the football department. He kind of oversees all of those. Not that Brandon couldn't do it, but to me, finding a Brandon Harris to replace, finding a Brian Carrington, I mean, Brandon learned under Brian Carrington. Those guys are harder to replace, man, because they got a unique personality, and they got to be able to relate to recruits, you know, teenagers and parents and things. So I don't personally, you know, I hate to say don't promote Brandon Harris because Brandon's done a great job, but I just think Brandon's really good at what his role is now. You know, give him more money if that's what it takes to keep him around. But I think Brandon Harris in that recruiting role is where he needs to be. Real
quick, couple of chats, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. I like Alan's idea. Sark after dark should be the GM. Daytime Sark can stay at coach. Makes a lot of sense, Alan. It really does. Why reinvent the wheel? Just let Sark after dark handle all the heavy lifting, or promote his wife. Somebody else, I think, said that in the chat. There are worse things that you could do than have L'Oreal running things, although maybe not dressing. No offense. Blake May says, Jason, did you win a new hat in Vegas? No Adidas.
I didn't win a new hat, but true story. I bought this hat in Vegas last year, and I just brought it with me for whatever reason this year. Hadn't brought me very good luck because I got my ass kicked last night at the tables. Probably still a little drunk from last night. Maybe it's been I've only been here, 24 hours? It's been a long 24 hours. So maybe I should have brought the Adidas hat for a little change of luck.
Hey, Catch, before you go to the next one, we came to this realization when Jason was on my show on Tuesday that Jason actually doesn't root for any Texas-based teams.
Oh, I knew
that's
that.
Random, but yeah, that's true. But that's random on why.
I know you know it, but it's crazy to think there isn't a Texas-based team that Jason actually roots for as a guy who lives in the state of Texas.
Well, truth be told, I despise most of them.
He's a native of Iowa.
Yeah.
And then
Catch knows the whole backstory. Yeah.
Like when I met him,
I like Austin FC.
Well, if I could get into soccer, I said maybe I need to adopt the Texas Stars or somebody, but I do need to find a Texas-based.
He's got to have one catch. Come on, man.
Well, I went to UT. Obviously, I want Texas to do well because it makes our jobs more enjoyable, right? So I don't consider myself a fan.
You don't have a tattoo.
No, I don't have a tattoo. No.
I was gonna say, lift your shirt up. Let's see.
Who says it'd be on my shirt? Under my shirt, might be somewhere else. Yeah. Drop your drawers. Yeah.
Horns down. Horns up when I look at it.
Okay. All right, guys, do us a solid. I'm looking at the clock. I'm on a little bit of a tight time frame. I gotta go see my kids swim. Sorry.
Nice.
So we're gonna wrap things up. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, get notifications, send positive vibes to Jason, who's going to go try to win some money. Huh? Yeah. Maybe?
A nice change of pace, yeah.
And then send some good vibes, some good mojo to Anwar, who's just trying to get through this. Tomorrow is Friday, and my man has had sick kids since Sunday.
It's rough.
It's been a rough week. January into February has not been fun for Anwar. So, maybe send some positive health thoughts into the Richardson family household. But for all of us, we do appreciate your time today. Interesting conversation. I didn't know going into today that we would be having this conversation, and yet I found it really interesting. The puppet strings behind the scenes of who's most important, what jobs are most important. And now that Texas has lost one of its real vital cogs in the machine, how do they replace that void? Well, that'll be more videos in the future to discuss. Who knows? Maybe even on the old fashioned tomorrow morning. Maybe we'll continue the conversation on House Divided tomorrow. For myself, for Alex, who's not here and at the Senior Bowl. Nice cover up there for me. Jason and Anwar. Guys, the War Room's going to be coming out in like about an hour-ish or so. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday into Friday.